Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome back to the Slow English channel. I am Daisy, a lecturer here in London, and wherever you happen to be joining us from today, we are absolutely delighted to have your company. Joining me, as always, from across the Atlantic, is the ever-insightful Professor Peter Hanson. How are things in New York today, Peter?
Things are bright and busy here in the city, Daisy. It's a pleasure to be back with you. Whether our listeners are out for a brisk morning walk, navigating their way through the daily commute, or perhaps simply carving out a quiet, reflective moment for themselves with a cup of coffee, I want to say thank you for pressing play. Today's discussion is one I've been looking forward to because it might just fundamentally shift your entire perspective on what it means to achieve fluency.
I couldn't agree more. I'd like to begin by posing a question to our audience. Have you ever felt as though you are doing everything precisely as you should, yet you aren't quite making the progress you desire? You are diligently listening to podcasts, perhaps watching educational videos, and immersing yourself in the English language daily. However, the moment it becomes your turn to contribute to a conversation, your mind suddenly goes completely blank. It is a peculiar and frustrating sensation, isn't it?
It really is, Daisy. It's like being on a treadmill. You're working hard, you're breaking a sweat, and you're putting in the hours, but you aren't actually moving forward. You start to second-guess yourself. You wonder, is this even working? Am I ever going to reach that level of fluency I've been dreaming of? If that resonates with you, I want you to take a deep breath and relax. You are certainly not alone. I see comments from students all the time who feel exactly this way.
Precisely. Some of my students remark that they feel they are improving at a snail's pace, while others feel that despite a high volume of listening, nothing seems to be changing in their active production. Both experiences are entirely valid, as the journey toward linguistic proficiency is unique for every individual. But there is a fundamental truth we must acknowledge. Just because the progress doesn't feel rapid doesn't mean the foundation isn't being built. I often compare learning English to watching the sunrise.
That's a beautiful way to put it. You're sitting there in the dark for a long stretch, wondering if the light is ever going to show up. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the horizon begins to change. Everything starts to glow. This episode is dedicated to all of you who are still showing up, still putting in the work, and still listening. We're going to dive into why the very thing you're already doing, listening, might actually be the most potent skill in your entire arsenal.
Before we delve into the heart of the matter, I should remind our listeners to download the free PDF we've prepared for this episode. It is meticulously designed with practice exercises and reflection questions to help you internalize these concepts. Furthermore, towards the end of our session, I shall conduct a vocabulary breakdown to explore some of the more sophisticated expressions we use today. But for now, Peter, let's start with a foundational question. Which comes first, speaking or listening?
It sounds like a simple, almost obvious question, doesn't it? But your answer can completely reorient your learning strategy. Here's the reality. Fluency, always, without exception, begins with the ear, not the mouth. You simply cannot speak what you have never truly heard. Trying to force yourself to speak without sufficient listening is like trying to compose a symphony without ever having heard a melody. You're just guessing, you're forcing it, and that is exactly where that deep sense of frustration comes from.
That is an excellent point. I often point my students toward the development of children. Infants do not begin their linguistic journey by memorizing grammar rules from a textbook. They spend months, even years, simply absorbing the sounds, the rhythmic patterns, and the subtle tones of the language, long before they utter a single coherent word. When they finally do speak, it isn't because they've studied, it's because they've heard the language 1,000 times over.
Exactly. But as adults, we tend to skip that crucial phase. We get impatient. We want results yesterday. We want to speak at a high level without giving our ears the time they need to properly tune in. And that's why fluency starts to feel like such a massive struggle. So today, we're slowing things down. We want to guide you back to the foundation, deep, meaningful listening. We aren't just telling you to listen more. We want to show you how to listen in a way that cultivates fluency naturally.
Let's introduce our first significant shift in perspective. Tip number 1, listen in layers. I've noticed that many learners approach listening as if it were a high-stakes examination. They play an audio clip once, attempt to decode each individual word, and feel utterly defeated if they miss a single syllable. However, authentic listening, the kind that fosters genuine growth, isn't about achieving immediate perfection. It's about purpose.
I love that. Purpose over perfection. Here's the strategy I recommend. Break a single audio clip into 3 distinct layers. First, just listen for the gist. What's the general topic? What's the mood? Is the speaker happy, serious, or maybe a bit frustrated? Don't hit pause. Don't stress over the vocabulary. Just let the sound wash over you. Then, go back and listen a second time, but this time, shift your focus to the structure. How are the sentences put together? What tenses are they using? Get a feel for the rhythm of the speech.
And finally, one should listen a third time, quite slowly. In this final pass, you ought to pay close attention to word choice, emotion, and intonation. Notice the subtle nuances. Did their pitch rise at the end of a sentence to indicate curiosity? Did they sound perhaps a bit sarcastic or weary? You are using the same audio, but with 3 entirely different objectives. That is truly how fluency feels, Peter.
Now, once your ears are tuned in like that, you might think the next step is to start talking right away. But hold on a second. A lot of learners make the mistake of jumping straight from listening to mimicking, and they end up sounding a bit robotic or hesitant. That's why our second tip is to shadow with silence first. Before you try to repeat a native speaker, give yourself the mental space to feel the language without the pressure of performance.
It's very much like music, isn't it? One does not typically attempt to sing along with a complex new composition the very first time one hears it. First, you listen, you absorb the melody and internalize the rhythm. Perhaps you might hum along quietly before you ever attempt the lyrics. English is no different. When you are practicing your shadowing, try this. Play a sentence, pause it, and instead of rushing to vocalize it, just sit with the sound in your mind for a moment.
Right on, Daisy. As we said, listen in layers. First for meaning, then for rhythm, and now, in this silent moment, listen for the feel. Shadowing is most effective when it's built on those layers. You want to let your brain dance with the rhythm of the English language before you try to echo it back. This is how you create natural, fluid speech instead of just reciting memorized phrases. Silence isn't empty. It is the preparation for a powerful performance.
That is a profound thought. However, none of these techniques will bear fruit if they are only practiced sporadically. This leads us to our third tip: create a daily listening ritual. I use the word ritual quite intentionally. It is more than just a habit or a scheduled activity. A ritual is something one protects. It possesses meaning.
It is that small, sacred window of your day that belongs entirely to your personal growth.
I couldn't agree more. When I was working on my own language skills, I made a pact with myself. No matter how chaotic my day got in New York, I would dedicate 15 minutes to pure listening. Not multitasking, not checking emails while it played in the background. Just me, my headphones, and a voice that pulled me into the language. Over time, that small promise became a cornerstone of my progress. And look, you don't need an hour. Even 10 minutes while you're brewing your tea or walking to the subway can reshape your brain. It's the frequency that matters, not the duration.
Indeed, ritual brings rhythm, and rhythm brings fluency. You must choose the moment that suits your lifestyle best. Perhaps it is during your morning walk or as you are winding down before bed. Whatever it may be, allow listening to become your quiet daily anchor.
Once that ritual is established, however, many of my students face another hurdle: the sheer volume of choices. What exactly should one listen to? This brings us to tip number 4, curate with intention. Do not feel obligated to consume everything.
That is such a vital point. We live in an age of information overload. Podcasts, YouTube videos, social media reels, it's endless. While having options is great, it can lead to choice paralysis. I've been there, having 5 different videos open, jumping between different accents and topics, and thinking I was being productive. In reality, I was just overwhelming my brain. It's content overload, and it drains your focus. The answer isn't to do more, it's to choose better.
I find the garden analogy quite apt here. One cannot possibly water every plant in the world, but one can tend deeply to a select few and watch them bloom beautifully. It is the same with your listening materials. Go deep rather than wide. Familiarity breeds fluency. When you return to the same voices or styles, your brain begins to relax. It starts to recognize specific rhythms, recurring phrases, and even the personality of the speaker. This home base provides a safe zone for daily exposure.
Exactly. Pick a couple of sources you genuinely enjoy and stick with them for a while. But once that foundation is rock solid and you're feeling comfortable, you have to take the next step to avoid getting stuck in a plateau. Tip number 5, listen across contexts. Real-world English doesn't sound like a scripted classroom exercise. It's fast, it's messy, and it's full of personality.
Now, I anticipate some of our listeners might be confused. Didn't we just suggest curating content and not listening to everything at once? It seems a bit contradictory, doesn't it? But these 2 tips are actually sequential phases. First, you require consistency and familiar voices to build a sense of security. But once you have that foundation, it is time to stretch your capabilities.
You've got to stretch those muscles, Daisy. I remember the first time I watched an unscripted interview between 2 comedians. They were laughing over each other, interrupting, using slang. I was frozen. I understood almost nothing. But that's because real-world English involves arguments, sarcasm, mumbling, and emotional shifts. If you stay in your comfortable bubble, your fluency stays limited. You need to intentionally step into different contexts: a vlog, an emotional speech, a news report, a comedy set.
It is much like training at a gym. Initially, one uses lighter weights and very controlled movements. However, to truly grow stronger, one must eventually challenge their balance and flexibility.
The goal isn't necessarily to understand every single word immediately, but to teach your brain that English is not a one-size-fits-all experience. By exposing yourself to various settings, you ensure that you won't need the world to slow down for you.
That's the power of listening. It shapes how you speak and how confident you feel. Now, to help everyone take these ideas further, I think it's time for you, Daisy, to lead us through that vocabulary breakdown you mentioned earlier. Let's look at some of those sophisticated words we've used today.
I would be delighted. Let us take a moment to soak up some of this beautiful vocabulary. First, we have underrate. To underrate something is to believe it is less important than it actually is. For instance, many people underrate the power of passive listening. Next is impatient. If you are impatient, you desire results immediately and feel a sense of irritation when they take time. As we discussed, many learners become impatient with their progress.
Those are great. I especially liked our use of overwhelm. That's when you feel like there's just too much going on for your brain to process. All that content online can really overwhelm you if you aren't careful. And that leads to curate, which means to carefully select and organize your materials, much like a museum curator chooses art. You want to curate your input so you don't get mentally exhausted.
Exactly. And if you don't curate, you might feel paralyzed, which in this context means being so unsure that you are unable to act. We also mentioned an anchor, which is something strong and steady that keeps you grounded. Your listening ritual should be the anchor of your daily routine. Then we have mimic, which means to copy someone's speech or behavior. We suggest you don't mimic too quickly. Feel the rhythm first.
And we used that great phrase, let it wash over you. This means to just listen and relax without trying to catch every single detail. Just let the sounds and the mood enter your mind. And then there was growing beyond your bubble, which refers to stepping outside your comfort zone to try new and challenging things. Finally, we use the expression one size fits all. This describes something designed to work for everyone, but in language learning, your journey is unique. It's never one size fits all.
Wonderful. I encourage our listeners to say these words aloud, gently, and repeatedly. The more you hear them and use them in context, the more naturally they will become part of your own voice. Peter, I think we have covered a tremendous amount of ground today. If our listeners feel they understood more of this conversation than they expected, that is a clear sign of progress.
It really is. That's fluency growing in the background while you weren't even looking. So keep showing up, keep listening, and remember that even on the days when it feels slow, your ears are learning more than you realize. It's been a pleasure being here with you, Daisy.
And with you, Peter. That concludes our episode for today. We shall see you next time on the Slow English channel. Until then, keep listening and keep growing. Goodbye for now.